Hello, and welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. I'm Monica, and this is Crystal.
Welcome back to the Mothers of All Crime. We're catching up today talking about Twin Flames universe.
Yes. So we have talked about them before, Jeff and Celia, and I believe it was episode 12. So if you want to go
Mhm.
check out the background information for Twin Flames, definitely go listen to that. It's going to give a lot of context on what we talk about now. But when the Twin Flames universe kind of took off, they started in 2017 and really were to gain followers and trying to build a business on love, basically. Became an international sensation and kind of turned into a religion. And Jeff started proposing the idea that he was Christ and he was directing people to change their genders because there's only two genders, there's the divine masculine and divine feminine, and homosexuality wasn't a thing. So he started this endeavor. And once the forced quote unquote of gender changing, that's really when it kind of blew up on them and the internet went after them because that's a really big deal. And some people obviously fled while others started dressing differently, taking hormones, some even going as far as having surgeries to follow
Mm.
the quote new identity that Jeff and Celeste were giving them, which is very
Right.
extreme.
Yeah.
So
You're just
that
like a feminine or a masculine, right? It's not about
yeah.
your
hmm
gender. Okay.
And so that's the quick little synopsis. And they never did any public interviews until recently. So
Mm.
in March of 2025, they actually reached out to CTV News. Avery Haynes was the interviewer. She's in investigative journalism, and they did an interview for the first time ever.
Mhm.
And I give the journalist a lot of credit. I think she did a really great job where she incorporated not only their interview, but also brought in a lot of people who, as Jeff calls them, his hate squad. um, was it the ego of this man is untouchable.
Unparalleled. Yeah,
But
incredible.
so they brought in these people who really were just defectors. They were people who had experiences with twin flames from the very beginning to recently, at all levels, from coaches to executives to just Joe Schmo who happened to be in the group. And Jeff, throughout everything's online, right? So it's not like they're having in person meetings. So all of this is documented. Everything he says, everything he preaches, everything he does, you can find online, either on their website, on YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is. So it's really hard, you would think, for him to deny things. Yet in this interview, here we go. We're going to deny a lot. So it starts off, one of my favorite quotes that I ever heard Jeff say was talking about wealth management, right? And the reason that he's going to make a lot of money is, and I quote, a great deal of wealth is just appropriate for me. And that's why he's going to make money.
Mm.
And
I agree with that personally. I think
right?
a great amount of wealth that's for me as well.
Yeah.
I love it. The confidence.
And so he starts his church because he doesn't want to pay taxes. It's a way around paying the employees because they can be deemed as volunteers. And he also puts other people in high powered positions, not him and his wife. So other people are listed as the CFO, the CEO, the COO, because God forbid someone like the IRS goes investigating, they're not going to be the ones that come tumbling down. Someone else is going to be there to take the fall. But during their interview, one of the questions was, are you a cult? Right? And that was actually the subject line of his interview email. So he reached out to Avery, and this subject line literally read, "We're not a cult." And she was like, all right, here we go. Like,
Doth thou protest too much?
yes. And his justification on that is you can't have a cult on the internet. In order to be a cult, you need to have a compound and live on a farm.
Hmm.
Yet
Mm,
one
I
of
don't know.
their executives who left has documentation of him saying, I want to buy a farm and have everybody move here.
He's a cult. He just doesn't have the farm yet.
Yeah, that clearly that's where he's lacking. And then
Yeah.
he goes off on how he's not Jesus. He's never claimed to be Jesus. Yet, in his defense, he never said Jesus. In all his videos, he just says Christ. Where I feel like we're splitting hairs at this point.
Oh. Well, no, Crystal. He's talking about Tim Christ. Totally different. He's talking about, the other widely renowned Christ that we're all familiar with. Or he's
Oh,
talking about
yes.
Christmas or something.
Obviously.
Yeah. I
So
am Christmas.
all of his videos, I am Christ. If you don't believe me, that's you're lost. Shalia's over here. I'm like, yeah, I'm
Mm.
banging Christ. Like comparing him to all the pictures
Ew.
because he grew his hair long and has a beard now. So he clearly looks like Christ. And the interview, you could
Clearly.
just see her face being like, what? Like you grew your hair out. Congratulations. That doesn't make you like okay. Um and so she kept trying to bring up some of the financial aspects of this, where obviously, if you are a church, there are certain tax benefits that you get. And some of it is very public on your returns. So the Divines did not comply with providing any openness to the financials of the businesses or the church, and neither did their CFO. Um, However, online, they did find that the church alone, not any of the associated businesses, the church alone had over $500,000 of expenses, mostly to YouTube services and defamation lawsuits and public relations.
Mm.
For a
Mm-hmm.
church that is 100% online, $500,000 of expenses.
It just sounds so ridiculous.
Right? And when asked about it, because she presented the idea of like, hey, like you have all these expenses to contractors and PR and blah, blah, blah. He instantly was like, we're not here to talk about that. She's like, we kind of are. Like, he kept trying to dodge questions and pretty much, again, talk about what he wants to talk about. The journalist did reach out to the IRS. They confirmed they have gathered info on the Twin Flames universe, but federal regulations, they could not confirm or deny any kind of open investigation. Personally, that in between the lines says, yeah, we're working on it. It's just not official yet. Like, just my opinion. But
Yeah, I would agree with that.
yeah, so then they go into why they think they're under scrutiny. And according to Shalise, it's because they are victims of cancel culture. And
Oh,
because
boo-hoo.
other people haven't healed their issues, that's why they're lashing out and attacking them. And he followed up with that he does yell at his followers sometimes, but it's because he loves them. And they feel the love because he wouldn't get so upset if he didn't care about them. And that's why he screams and yells and berates people. And some people might take that the wrong way.
Right. Well, you could see how they'd get confused.
Right. Yeah, and then they start going off about how people love to hate people who love others and used examples of Jesus Christ and Martin Luther King. Those were their examples.
Are we sure Jesus Christ? Or is this still Christmas? Christmas?
Yeah.
Because he's not he didn't say he was Jesus.
Yes. Just Christ. And then she obviously had to bring up the gender conforming surgeries, the gender changing, that whole dynamic, right? Because it's a huge issue for this group. And
Huge.
I was eating dinner when I was watching this, and I literally almost dropped my plate because his response was that the LGBTQ plus would agree that changing gender isn't a harmful thing. And that was his answer to her question about him directing to do it. And I almost lost it because that's the whole point, right? Where if you are actually transgender, yes, do what you want to do to make you feel like the best version of you. If you want to be in a different body, change your body to be the way you feel inside. 100%. But doing it because someone else tells you to, or it's going to please somebody else, is extremely harmful. And I would argue that community would be very against that because it takes away from the difficulties that that population has already. It makes it feel not as significant, right? Because that community has a hard time living before those surgeries or before changing their social presentation. And you just saying, like, oh, it's not a big deal. You can just explore it and play with it and do it. That's really rude to me.
I agree. I feel like it's minimizing a struggle that an actual trans person might be going through, and it's imposing struggles on people that are very real now, but it seems to be completely made up. It doesn't seem like this was a problem. It seems like they just didn't have a good ratio of sexes in the group, so they just had to make a bunch of men
Yeah.
because it was only women joining their group, and they wanted to have divine masculines. So they were just doing it for a completely selfish, self-serving purpose and manipulating people into making big decisions, which I think can be taking the whole community backwards in a way, because you're using these surgeries that are controversial already and you're using them for a crazy reason and you don't even really want it. So I just can't imagine that that's good for anyone except for possibly Jeff and Shalia.
Right. And like you said, there was a drastic number of women, hardly any men. And one of their tenets of Twin Flame Universe, both the love journey and the church, is that homosexuality is not a thing. So him bringing up that community already gives me the ick because you're bringing in a community that you have already testified that you don't believe is true. And then he starts crying in the middle of randomly just starts crying about how much he loves Jesus. And
He's so
The
gross.
Oh, I know. The reason that he left his church, because he was raised Catholic, is because of their stance on gay marriage, and that he thinks that if you're gay and you want to get married, you should do it. And it was painful for him to leave his church because he loved Jesus so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yet his
Mm-hmm.
church has the same rule, if not more extreme.
They just are pro sex changes, but they're not actually in favor of gay relationships, which is an interesting
But you're
stand.
willing to leave your church over gay relationships because they should be able to do it, but not in my church. Like,
No, because his church has their own special rules for everything.
yeah, the contradictory is insane. He then goes off about how he feels that people feel loved and they encourage people to explore different things, and that's the power dynamic that they encourage. Because the interviewer is very much you're ruling by fear, basically, and your power dynamic is very one-sided in this group, and both of them denied it. And then during the interview they did a little like clip stitch of him saying, "You don't please me here. You guys are horrible. Freedoms will be taken from you if you disobey me." Like things like this. While he's also sitting in this interview kind of saying, "Oh no, we are supportive and we want people just to explore their opinions and explore these feelings. Not that they have to do it."
Mm.
And I think he forgets that everything he says is online. Like all you got to do is Google it.
Well, that's what I love about these cult leaders in general is they're big documenters, and there's so
Mhm.
much footage, there's so many recordings of you saying all of these unhinged things, and now recordings of you denying saying those things,
Yeah.
and it clips very well together for sure.
Mhm. So then he cries again randomly about
Hmm.
Jesus and how much he loves him. But there was
Wow.
also a point that was kind of chilling, and you could see the mask kind of come off for a minute because the interviewer kept pestering him. Like she wasn't letting him get around these questions. He's very used to his word salads, but just then being able to like answer a different question or pivoting. And she wasn't allowing it. She very much was like, "No, the question that I asked you was this." And he
I
started,
love that.
oh, I know. I thought she did great. And so she poses the question again. And he literally went, "Hold on. I need you to give me a minute to collect myself," because he started getting flustered. He sat there with his
Mm.
eyes closed, and it was so like you could tell she was just looking at like Shalia's and like looking at him like what's happening? Like
Oh
and
my gosh.
this was early on too. And then he comes back. His body language is different. His tone was different. His like it was creepy. Like he flipped the switch back on and being like, "Hold on, you can't freak out. You're on a PR tour basically." And you really saw that flip of sides that he has, right? That love
Hmm.
bomby, calm, collected. Yeah, absolutely. This is the journey. Directly after him flustered be like, "No, I'm not," like annoyed with her questions. So I thought that was kind of interesting when you start diving into it. And I think my opinions on Shalice, whatever her name is, um, kind of
I
changed a little
think
bit.
I think Shalia.
I
I
do
think.
too, but I don't know. I think I've said it
Okay.
both
You know
ways.
what? Made up name that I
Yes.
don't particularly care for. So your
Um,
opinions of her have changed?
I think so. I
Big fan
think
now?
oh yeah, she's my favorite.
That really
I
tracks.
think originally I was under the impression she was a little bit more just like go with the flow, and she wasn't as much of a mastermind. And after this interview, I think she is completely jointly involved. I think he may be the louder face of it, but she's smarter than I think people give her credit for. And there were a lot of times where she chimed in, and documentation that came up from these quote hate squads. She's very involved and she's very smart. And I think she allows the idea of being the submissive wife to as a level of protection again, where if things come crumbling down, she's not fully aware. I'm just the wife. I'm just the support. Like I think she's a lot more integrated than she wants us to think she is.
I think so too, but I think she wants to have the plausible deniability.
Yeah. And again, they brought up how they make their money. Never got a direct answer. Um he got very flustered and kind of just ignored the question again. But what I think is interesting is when they start kind of towards the end of it, of this idea that it's all just exploration. Because
Mm-hmm.
in our last episode, we talked about abandoning their golden children, right?
Right.
And during this interview, they are now saying they have abandoned the idea of golden children. That it was just something that was silly that they were experimenting with, and they're done with it.
That was like their whole thing.
Uh-huh. At the end, so the interviewer jumped on it, which I loved. And she's like, so is the twin flames universe just an experiment that something could fall away? Is the divine masculine and feminine just something that might not be forever? And they were like, yeah. Like they openly, without directly saying it, we're just playing around and we're seeing what people are willing to do. And if it no longer suits us and people are no longer willing to do it, we'll just pivot and something else will happen.
Wow. I mean, to say it so blatantly is kind of wild.
Yeah.
I feel like that is true a lot, but it's just surprising to admit that.
Yeah. And I think that's where it was because very quickly after, she asked if the twin flames universe was ever going to go away. And Sylvia very much was like, hey, you know what? No, I think we're only going to grow. I think we're going to expand. We have all this amazing stuff. And that's that connection, right? Of like, okay, well, if this thing stops working, we'll just convince people to do something else. Which I think every cult leader does, but that's confident. Like to just blatantly be like,
They really I think that there are some cult leaders who believe their own things.
Yeah.
I do not believe that Jeff and Shalia believe any of the things that they're saying. They know that it's not true, every single thing that they're saying, and that they're doing it strictly to manipulate the followers, strictly to make money, and that there is no higher power or anything like that they're actually aligning themselves with. And I don't think for Jeff it was ever real. Maybe for Shalia it was at some points, but she totally knows that none of this is real.
Yeah. I think in 2017 when they started just the relationship advice stuff, I think they did believe it because they both were into that world, like third eye, healing, holistic energies connect you, twin flame love. But I think the minute that they got like a quote following, that's when they were like, we're gonna monetize, we're gonna build, and they were like, okay, now what do we need? Let's pivot. How do we get more money? Like I think it very quickly turned into, oh, you believe anything I tell you. And here we are.
So I feel like for Shalia, that's definitely true. I feel like Jeff solely did it to make a business. And he just really wasn't interested in working. And I think he took a page out of L. Ron Hubbard's book and was like,
Mm-hmm.
I could make a Scientology. No problemo.
Yep. The best way to make money is to start a religion. L. Ron Hubbard.
Exactly.
Uh,
Absolutely. And if you don't want to pay taxes, I mean, no better way to do it.
mm-hmm. And I think the last thing that they brought up during the interview, again, that you're not going to be surprised about, is their daughter.
Oh
And
no.
she's 2 years old now. She's very cute. From the outside, they are just a standard family. Um, one of the followers is their nanny who lives with them, because of course.
Sure. Well,
Um,
they're not going to take care of her themselves. Come
right.
on.
Well, then you have the family dynamic where his job is to support his wife and her job is to support the child. And if
Hmm.
Grace, their child, chooses to interact with him, then he will do so. Ick. Um, and then it brought up again the whole idea of that their daughter, through their logic and intuition, they've decided she is going to be of God's lover. God alone will be the love of their daughter. And she's not going to have all these other influences. Um, they claim they're still going to teach her about sex and things like that, but they know that their daughter's lover is only going to be God. And if you remember, because I remember during our episode, it is
Disgusting.
cool you grooming your kid. If you are Christ and your daughter's lover is only going to be God.
Oh, disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Gives me the heebie jeebies. I feel like he's preparing everyone for his daughter joining his harem, and
Mm-hmm.
it's foul. But I feel like, and I don't just feel like this, it seems to be that there's a huge correlation between cult and sexual abuse of followers, and cult leaders just doing whatever they want with their followers. And it's just sickening to
Yeah.
think of the possibilities.
Yeah. And this is a worldwide organization. Like people have moved to different countries, people have changed their genders, people have spent tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars to this program. They have volunteered hours. There's the word slavery being tossed around because people are working for free for multiple years. There was one woman who said that she only made $25 for the entire time that she worked for the company in a pretty high ranking position. And you have the leaders living in a 7,000 square foot Michigan mansion. It it's interesting how things are starting to come to light. And I'll be curious as this now comes out if more people will defect or if the followers will buckle down, because we look at things like Keith Raniere, for example. When shit hit the fan, a lot of people left, and then the true followers really buckled down and were like, nope, this just proves that you're after him, this just proves that we're right. So it'll be curious how Twin Flames kind of evolves now that the lights really put on them.
Yeah, I think it was a bad move on their part and that they should be lurking in the shadows. But they're egomaniacs and they need attention. So they're not going to do that.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I just
shocked
anticipate
they
some dark
waited this
updates.
long. Yeah, I'm waiting this long
Me
because
too.
at the beginning of the interview, she Avery asked them that she was like, okay, why now? And their together response was before was their time to share their story, like the people coming out with their abuse complaints and things like that. And it wasn't their time to share because they didn't want to take away from that. Again, presenting that they're these great and gracious human beings. So now that the dust has settled, it's our time. However, every interviewer has a PR consultant right there with them and a damage control like specialist. And if this was purely from a good place, why do you have consultants there?
Ugh. Yikes.
Yep. So that was our most recent interview with them. I'll be interested if they start doing more interviews as time goes. But only time will tell.
Yeah. I love this update, and I both hope and don't hope that we see more of them, but I think that we will.
Yeah, I agree. Well, until next time, we will talk soon and we'll see if anything comes of it.
All right, catch you back next week. Bye.